Now that was a weekend of rugby. That had everything. You had red cards, whether we liked it or not. We had all of the yellow cards. We had last minute tries. We had last minute penalty kicks. We had drama galore. We had comebacks. We had I love international rugby. Welcome to the All Things Rugby review of week 3. My gosh, there were some good games. Let's get into it. First game of the weekend, Italy versus South Africa, and we were so excited. Rassi changed the team quite a lot. Italy are off an amazing win against the Wallabies, and we're sitting there going, oh, here we go. If this is the time South Africa are going to come unstuck, it's against a big Italy team that are full of confidence. And then what happens? 10 minutes in, boom, shoulder to the head, and another red card for South Africa. Now, look, Rassi came out afterwards and he was the first to say he doesn't know what he has to do anymore, right? They made such a big thing before about being to teach their locks how to get low and how to tackle low. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks in a row, you could not write it. But the biggest thing is, yes, it's 2 weeks in a row, but actually this has been all summer for South Africa. They've had multiple yellow and red cards, even with Jasper Wiese getting a ban back in, I think, June against Portugal. So, look, something's going on. We'll get into it later because there was other red cards as well. Maybe we just do a whole video on World Rugby and red cards. I'm sure that will go down like an absolute house on fire. But look, South Africa, 10 minutes in, permanent red card as well. Not even a 20-minute, a permanent red card. But he pulled it out of the bag again. Rassi is not scared to make these big decisions and these big calls. And it's great to see a coach that actually gets together with his team and he's like, right, here's the problem, here's the solution, how are we going to solve it? He made so many changes. This is 0-0 as well, which is wild, right? But the biggest one that we were so upset to see was Ben Jason Dixon having to go off as well. He was a player that we were so looking forward to watching. The likes of him and Cameron Hanekom in the future are no doubt going to be 100 cappers for the Boks. But it was his opportunity to really show what he can do against a decent back row for Italy as well. He gets pulled off. They have to bring on another lock. But that wasn't it. He then made so many other changes straight away. He brought on Andre for a winger. He made a change up front and brought on Wilco Low. I think that one might have been for an injury though. But all of a sudden, we're 20 minutes into this game and Rassi's made 4 changes already. Drama in Italy. But the thing about this Boks team is, look, whether it's 14 players later on in the game, they ended up with 13 at one point as well. They just know what to do to win. And even with 14, you would never know that there's a player missing. Like, Italy could not exploit the wider channels, even with an overlap, where we saw them do that against Australia, even when Aussie had 15 players on the pitch. So, look, fair play to them. They both exchanged penalties. It was 3-3. And then they managed to get the try just before half-time as well. And you're sitting there going, what do we have to do to beat this Boks team? So we then get into the second half and then Rassi makes another big call. And for the second week in a row, he pulls off Siya Kolisi, this time for about 45 minutes gone. So look, after 100th cap, you're like, man, let's see it get 80 under his belt. But, you know, if there's anyone that's going to make a sacrifice for that team, it's the captain and the leader that is Siya Kolisi. And it looks like he had a good night out afterwards as well. So yeah, look, he's not scared to make these big calls. And obviously it worked out. They then get a second yellow card of the game. And you're sitting there going, man, they've got 13 on the pitch at the moment. And then even though Italy got a yellow card, South Africa still managed to score tries, even a player down. Morne van der Berg picks up from the base of the scrum and gets over. And you're sitting there going, Italy, this was your chance. Pollard had a really good game after resting over the last couple of weeks. And we said this, the fact that South Africa have been so good without a double World Cup winning fly half, you just have to tip your hat and applaud them. Libbok comes on, Grant Williams comes on. Grant Williams ends up scoring an awesome try. And Libbok, unfortunately, does what Libbok does and has to steal the limelight, right? Ethan Hooker scored his first try in the last play of the game. Clock's in the red. Libbok to take the last conversion. And what happens? 3, 2, 1... Timer runs out and he gets done with the shot clock. I mean, Libbok, you are not doing yourself any favours here. Look, Italy, they didn't play bad, but that was their opportunity to really, if you're going to take, look, I can't even say take a big scalp. They did that last week, but to get a victory against the double World Cup winning team would have been absolutely ridiculous. So, look, fair play to Italy. let's see what happens next week. They're hosting Chile, so again, they've got an opportunity to just rotate and get some other players for some game time now. So that's good for them. And on the other hand, the Boks, I mean, I don't even know what to say anymore. It's like every week they face a new challenge and they come up with a new solution, right? Like the good thing is, and I'm sure Dane from Kick On's going to love this one, but they got rid of all of their silly plays. In the summer, we saw them do midfield lineouts after midfield lineout, and we're like, what are you doing? We saw them do like the little short drop kick that ended up giving away a scrum as well. You're like, look, you're good enough to just play the game. And we can see 14, 13, it doesn't even matter anymore. So yeah, look, big games coming up for them now. So let's see what happens next week. Over to London and Allianz Twickenham, HQ of rugby. And if there was one game I said I was so happy to be wrong about my prediction, it was this one. England versus New Zealand. After the 2019 World Cup was the last time that England beat them. They haven't won at home since 2012. So this was huge. And after last year, 40 hitting the post and missing a drop goal, this was going to be one of the best games to watch this weekend. And it delivered on every single level. We had a really interesting first 10 minutes in this game with both teams looking to attack. Both teams was making line breaks, but both teams defended so well. Both teams had opportunities to score, but the breakaways, we were seeing Cam Roygaard run back and make tackles. We saw Alex Coles get held up on the line, and we're sitting there going, core, this is going to be a back and forward. But All Blacks managed to get ahead with 2 scores early on, and they go in 12-0 up. And there were different scores as well. Cody Taylor out on the wing has scored so many tries over and over again in that 5-metre channel. But New Zealand managed to manipulate England's defence very well. 12-0 down, and we're sitting there going, man, based on this, New Zealand can just put the foot down and keep going. But England stay calm, England stay composed, they stuck to their processes. George Ford had a blinder, and they managed to get back in the game. I said in the preview that midfield of the All Blacks was going to be a real dangerous tool that we're going to use. But Ollie Lawrence, who only, less than a year ago was injured and out, looks so good at the moment. And I heard a conversation on the podcast recently about, is he like a new Manu, a Manu 2.0? And they were the first to say he actually has more in his locker than Manu. Like the ability for someone to just run a good line and be really physical, he has in abundance. But we saw later on, he's also got real slick, silky hands at the line as well. So he's such a dual threat. Look, he can kick, but we're going to talk about England's kicking game in a bit. So England are 8-12 down with a couple minutes to go, and they're breaking into New Zealand's 22. And what happens? Minutes to go before half-time, into the pocket, George Ford, as clean as you like, slots another beautiful drop goal in his career. Now, look, I'm the first to joke about Sir Clive talking about drop goals in the game and talking about keeping the scoreboard ticking over. But England are so good at managing that scoreboard and coming away from 22 entries with points, led by Fordy, who was, at this rate, no matter how good Finn Smith is, you can't take that shirt away from him. He's done everything you have asked, and we're getting the results now. We have a crazy start to the second half with New Zealand giving away their first penalty of the match. Now, that is also ridiculous. Like, we talk about South Africa's discipline or, lack thereof, according to World Rugby, but New Zealand for 40 minutes of that test match didn't give away a penalty, and the first one they do, arguably it's a real silly one as well. Cody Taylor gets a yellow card for interfering with a ruck on the floor. So he's off. England now going against 14 men, and they absolutely turn the dial up. England's attack was flowing so well in this game, and the ball carrying from the likes of Ben Earl and Sam Underhill, who we said, we know he's a test match animal, but he hasn't really been in and around that England squad, and especially the starting lineup too much, and they've rotated so much because of the depth. He ends up getting over for a score. New Zealand then start going to their bench. Fordy is just having a masterclass with kicking, and again, we're going to talk about what happened in the Ireland game, but this utilization of different types of kicks, we saw George Ford put the most beautiful spiral bomb up in the air as well, which was just impossible to catch all day long for New Zealand. I also have to hold my hands up and apologise. Joe Hayes, Jamie George, Finn Baxter. I mean, look, I was really questioning whether we should start with that front row and whether even Joe Hayes is of an international test standard. Sorry, bro, I got it completely wrong. Not only were we winning penalties on our ball, we were winning penalties against the head at scrum time. And it was from a scrum we managed to get our next try as well. Absolute dominant scrum, and we're sitting there going, hold on, I think we can drive them here. Crash ball, Ollie Lawrence in at 12, not 13, takes it to the line, defender suck in, and he just gives the most beautiful little pop. And Dingwall, who had a relatively quiet game, and I know I'm critical of him as well, but he walked through, biggest smile on his face as well, to put England ahead by more than a score. The score's 25-12. England are in control. Bennell gets a yellow card, and we're sitting there going, if there was a time that the All Blacks needed to strike, this was it. They started going to their bench a little bit more, and they managed to get a try and get back into this game. And now we're sitting there going, right, lads, game on. Let's see who really has it upstairs mentality-wise to see this game out. 25-19, the game's in the balance, and we've seen New Zealand come back before. We've seen what DMAC can do off the bench. But England managed to hold out. They get a penalty, and it's almost like it was written in the stars. Almost the exact same position that Fordy missed last year. He slots over a beautiful penalty to just calm things down, stretch England's lead. And then what do? We go and score again. Who was involved? The blonde head, Henry Pollock, just giving it absolute large ones. Oh, what a performance from England. Now, look, they've had an amazing year, and obviously so many boys went off with the Lions, getting that winning victory as well. But that's England 10 in a row. That's outrageous. And look, Steve Borthwick and the coaches have done such a good job, not just with game plans, but clearly giving England the tools and the confidence to go out and play and see what they have in front of them and then make the decision. And clearly, they're making the right one. So, look, going into next week, yeah, look, we can get some different game time into some boys, but why not finish on an absolute high? Go put your strongest 15 back onto that pitch and just go out with an absolute bang. Luckily for you guys at home, especially you Welsh fans, I'm probably going to keep this one a little bit short. As you can see from our social feeds, we had a lot of content and fun we could do with this game. But Wales versus Japan. Now, we said it might be exciting. It was exciting for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. Wales looked average at best. Both coaches came out after the game and said they weren't happy with the performance from either of their sides. Eddie Jones came out and actually backed the Welsh players and was like, look, they're developing. You can see that they've got so many good players. And he blamed the WRU for all of the stuff going on behind the closed doors to not being able to get these players in. But yeah, look, it was just, it was the battle of 12th versus 13th, right? Now, the thing for Wales in this match is because they won and because they secured that 12th position, it means that for the World Cup, they'll be in the second banded group. So they won't have two big names in that group, which look, for them is fantastic. Whether they qualify or not, again, we'll see what happens over the next kind of 12, 24 months. But yeah, look, and as for Japan, they got so many new caps playing over the Pacific Nations Cup and in this tour. But Eddie made it clear, they just don't have it yet, what it takes. They're not making the right decisions. We talk about the likes of England making the right decisions when they see what's on. Japan just aren't making the right decisions and keep losing the ball. And even though they ran for over 1,000 meters and they had territory in this game, they just couldn't put Wales to bed. Now, if you can't put Wales to bed, then what are you going to do when you come up against a bigger team? So, yeah, lots of questions there for Japan and Eddie. And as for Wales, doesn't get any easier, I'm afraid. You've got New Zealand next and then South Africa. So best of luck, lads. Return of the Mac once again. Mac Hansen back in green and a hat-trick to suit. We're going to do a full video during the week of where Australia and this Wallabies team is at the moment. I would say that they do look tired. And look, one of the reasons they look tired is because they started last year playing Super Rugby, and you've had the likes of McWright and Wilson, without injury, played most games. So they played Super Rugby, then they played Fiji for Australia, then they played the Lions, then they had the Rugby Championship, now they've got the Northern Tour. The playing journeys alone would be through the roof. So we'll break down Australia later on. There's a lot of stuff to be said there, but Ireland looked good. We haven't seen it the last couple of weeks, and we questioned kind of what we were going to get out of this team, but their attack shape looked really well. They were using the right options. We saw from 2 of Mac's tries, they were literally carbon copy. The shape that they put together was awesome. They had to make some changes. At the end of the game, Gibson Park went into the back 3 and set up an assist with a beautiful crossfield kick. And he's quick enough to play wing, which is wild. Big shout to Sam Prendergast. Now, Crowley obviously got the shirt for the last couple of games, and although they got a win and it wasn't great in Chicago, Crowley didn't necessarily have a bad performance. But Sam Prendergast has just put on an absolute kicking show. His varieties of kicks were fantastic. He hit his first ever drop goal for Ireland. He hit spiral bombs that, I mean, he went for a 50-22 spiral from a tap that Jorgo ended up knocking on. It just an absolute cracking performance from a young man that is just so far ahead in his development. And with the likes of Sexton, they're coaching him. With the likes of Andy Farrell to kind of keep him on the straight and narrow. With Crowley there to push him as well. And, you know, Andy Farrell made a comment. He's still got Harry Byrne behind as well. Look, I think these two are going to be the 10s for the next, 10 years for Ireland. So that is great to see. The last game on Saturday night was France versus Fiji, and I said it in my quick review. If you haven't seen this one, please go and watch the highlights. They're available on the Rugby app. They're available on allthingsrugby.com. It was incredible. Deportier was playing in midfield in his home stadium. Man, he handed off Tuisova. Tuisova went flying. We haven't ever seen that. Like, he put on a display that was like, right, I'm here. This is my stadium. This is my shirt. And I'm going to be the person to take France forward. France also made some changes up front and they looked dominant as anything. So, look, this French team we saw in the summer when they did rotate the youngsters coming through. We know how good top 14 is. We know how good Pro D2 is as well, right? So, it's going to be really interesting come Six Nations time to see how this French team develop. As for Fiji, they've gotten a lot better. We said years ago that if they could put their set piece together, if they could play open, a little bit more structure when needed, this team was going to keep developing. And it's there. You can see when they play against tier 1 teams, they are there or thereabouts. And although there was a couple of yellows in this and a couple of other questionable high shots, Fiji look like you keep that team together, you keep the Drua playing together well in Super Rugby, and by the World Cup, we might see Fiji get to a semi-final. You heard it here first. Last game of the weekend did not disappoint, unless you're a Scottish fan. Oh my God, I said to everyone, watch this game with your roast dinner and a pint, because this one did not disappoint. First half, Scotland looked good. I'm going to caveat that with Argentina lacking a little bit of oomph. Now they rotated and we'll get to that in the second half. Scotland went 21-0 up and were in cruise control. Like, Ewan Ashman looked like a world-class hooker against this lackluster Argentinian defence. But oh my God, I said it last week, I said it the week before, the lack of championship mentality that this Scottish team has was clear and obvious. And I know it sounds bad that I'm just absolutely like beating a dog when it's down, but my gosh, something has to happen to this Scottish team. Now, look, we've just announced the Nations Cup. We know that they're now going to be playing more tier 1 teams, but there is no excuse. It was only a couple of years ago, Glasgow won the URC. They've beaten England in the Six Nations. They've been okay-ish. But when it comes down to it, they just don't have what it takes to beat these teams. You're 21-0 up. Oh my gosh. One of the funniest parts of this game was just watching the Argentinian coaches, even up until 21 down, they were just going absolutely mental at the top of Murrayfield. And in the 45th minute, 21 down, they made their changes. They brought on 5 subs at once, including Paulo Matera, Santi Carreras, Gallo up front, and it absolutely changed the game for them. Argentina make a break. They go the length of the pitch, and it ends up with Blair Kinghorn getting a yellow card. And straight away from that, Montoya gets a try. Straight away from the kickoff, Isgro goes over for another try, and it's 21-12, and we're sitting there going, surely Scotland aren't going to mess this one up. Scotland get a penalty, and Finn Russell just takes big, deep breath, calms everyone down, and is like, lads, we've got this. chill out. Slots over the penalty, 24-12. Okay, we're back to normal now. Nah, Puma's time to shine. In the last 10 minutes of this game, the Pumas managed to get 3 tries and Santi knocks over all 3 conversions for a man of the match performance off the bench. Oh my God, Scotland, what on earth was that? Now, they play Tonga next week. Now, no disrespect to Tonga, but that's nothing that Scotland can get, even decent game time from. So the whole autumn is, dare I say, wasted. And now going into next year's Six Nations, it's like they have to start again. So, yeah, tough one to ask up there. You've got Townsend, who's on a consultancy sabbatical-ish with Newcastle. Is it time for him to make a change so someone can go in for, 2 years before the World Cup? Does something else have to happen with Edinburgh? Because we've seen the difference between Glasgow and Edinburgh was massive. So do we need to pump a little bit more money into Edinburgh? Yeah, a lot of questions to ask up there. And as for Argentina, it's almost like they don't know what to do if they are the favourites for the match, which is quite a concern because next week they're going to England. They're going to play England at Twickenham. And we saw over the summer, England rotated, albeit, and come away with 2 good wins. But after that, you can just imagine they're going to be sitting there going, no, we need to finish on a high. We can't do what we just done against Scotland. So, look, next week, England versus Argentina is going to be one hell of a game. What an incredible 6 games we had this weekend. And we go into next week as excited as ever, where there's a couple of key clashes that we'll be previewing later in the week. So for the rest of the week, make sure you stay tuned, follow us across all socials, check out all of our editorials on allthingsrugby.com. And if you haven't already, download the Rugby app to stay up to date with all the weekend's matches. Once again, thank you for watching. My name is Missionaire, and this has been All Things Rugby.